In this video, I want to talk about customizing the Solidworks interface. The biggest part of the Solidworks interface is what we call the Command Manager. You can turn the Command Manager off if you want by right-clicking on it and turning off Enable Command Manager. If you do this, you're going to have to use just the standard toolbars, and you can get those by right-clicking in the toolbar area, go to the toolbars list, and turn on the toolbars that you want to have on. I like to work with the Command Manager, but I like to work with it in a certain way, and let me show you what that is. I like to first turn off all the text. If you're a new SolidWorks user, and that should be no one, you can right-click and get rid of the Use Large buttons with text. Of course, here I'm using a reduced interface because shooting these videos, I have to have large buttons and a screen that allows me to show everything but allows it to be big enough so you can read the text. My interface isn't exactly a great one to emulate, but I will be able to show you how to set yours up however you want to. One of the things that I like to do with the Command Manager is get rid of the sketch, because if you're in a sketch, you can't get to the features very easily. In order to get rid of a certain tab on the Command Manager, I'll right-click in the Command Manager, go to Tabs, and turn off Sketch. Now notice I've got the Sketch toolbar set up over to the right, and this is the way I like to run the software. If you need additional tabs, again, just right-click on the tab or in the area and turn on the things that you want. It really depends on what type of design you're doing, but you want to have at least features turned on. I like to use surfaces and evaluate, but really I don't switch back and forth that much between the tabs in SolidWorks. As long as you've got all the tools that you need along here, you're doing pretty good. And if you need to add more tools to your toolbars, go to Tools, Customize, Commands. From here, you should be able to drag just about anything onto either toolbars or Command Manager tabs. The flyout toolbars are an important aspect because you can apply a flyout to your toolbar and then have access to all of the items in that flyout. For example, under Features, I have my reference geometry, and I can access all of these without having each individual item on the toolbar all the time. So that helps save time for less commonly used tools. I have 3 different criteria that I try to look at when I'm setting up an interface. The first one is to minimize the number of clicks. To minimize the number of clicks, you generally have to have a lot of tools on the screen because you don't want to be clicking on drop downs or needing to go to the menus or this or that. The second thing you might want to minimize is mouse travel. If you're doing it that way, a lot of people will use the gestures and set up the gestures menus. A lot of people will also use the right-click menus. And if you do this, you have to memorize all of these icons because getting the tooltips is kind of a waste of time. And also the left mouse button context menus. These are very important because they bring up a limited command set and usually things that you're going to use most often. The third thing that I'm trying to maximize with an interface setup is time. That to me is the most important one. And to me, the fastest thing is to make sure that you've got a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Now that also requires that you have to memorize a bunch of keyboard shortcuts. So each one of these approaches has strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to appeal to different types of people. If you have a small screen, you don't want to take up as much space, and you might be willing to give up mouse travel or clicks or time even just to get back some more screen space. For example, I have my view orientation toolbar set up permanently off the screen, so it's not taking up valuable screen space, but it is still available all the time. My favorite interface tool is the keyboard. I mentioned that, and let's take a look at how you set that up. You go to Tools, Customize, Keyboard, and even just the interface for this is pretty slick. If you go under the Show drop-down, you can show all the commands with existing keyboard shortcuts. And this trims everything down for you, gives you a nice, neat list, and you can print this out very easily right from here. One thing I like to do is to group commands according to some sort of scheme. So, for example, a lot of my surfacing commands will use the shift. A lot of your standard Windows commands like print, copy, paste, those involve the control key. Many of your view commands are already set up in the heads-up view toolbar. And you might be able to get rid of some of these because you don't use the button for zoom to fit. You just press F all the time. Zoom to area is one I never use. And zoom previous, that's one that a lot of people forget about. Unfortunately, this one is not, you can't use it with your spaceball. But the ability to turn on certain types of reference geometry like planes and axes and temporary axes, these are all important. And you have to make sure that whatever shortcut you set up doesn't conflict with something else. For example, if I were to put T in here for Browse Recent Folders, Solidworks is going to tell me that it's already assigned to another command. And it's going to ask me if I want to use it anyway and knock out the other command and override it with the Browse Recent Folders. In this case, that's not what I want to do. Many people like to set up the mouse gestures. Let's zoom this out a little bit so you can see everything. You've got a ring for parts, assemblies, and drawings. To access these, you just hold down and drag your right mouse button, and it will automatically pick up the top view or the left view or whatever. However you have this set up. It's a great option for people who like this sort of thing. I never use this, so I never use this because I'm using a trackball and I don't feel confident in being accurate enough to get the correct command all the time. The menus can be altered, but this is generally viewed as kind of an old school way of doing things. You should know how to use the menus, but I think of it as a last resort sort of thing. There are only certain things that you'll go to the menus for, things that they don't necessarily have on a toolbar. The shortcut bars are otherwise known as the S toolbars, and you can press the S key and have a toolbar come up. To me, that's a lot of work just to get at something you don't want to put on the interface anyway. I would rather just write a hotkey for something, since you're going to have to press the keyboard key anyway, and then also use your mouse. It just seems like the keyboard shortcut is a better way to go. Some of the settings that you can use along with the regular interface are the icon size. Notice I've got mine set to medium. If you've got a very high resolution display, you may choose to use a larger icon size. It helps them be easier to see, easier to select, and depending on your skill level and your familiarity with the software, you may want to turn on or off your tooltips. You can have large tooltips with images or large tooltips without the images, or just the small tooltips. The difference between large and small tooltips is you're going to have more information on a large tooltip. I generally keep these on for doing demonstrations so I can show the names of commands as I mouse over them. The context toolbar is what I call the left-click toolbar. It's the short toolbar with no text that you get when you select something, or the small part of the toolbar that's on top of your right mouse button menu. Several things can show up in the context toolbar, including quick configurations and quick mates. Those are important to have if you're using that type of functionality regularly. And then the quick access tools are the tools that are shown up here. You can position these either in the menu bar, which saves space, or you can put it in the command manager, which you might be able to argue cleans up the display a little bit. You would lock the command manager and toolbars if you have a guest using your computer and you don't want them to mess with your interface. I've mentioned the heads-up view toolbar a couple of times, and that's what this is. You can get your view orientation here. I've left my interface relatively stock because if I'm demonstrating things to people on YouTube, they're going to look at my interface, my custom interface, and wonder where everything is that they're familiar with. I like to use this stock, but there are a lot of things that I get rid of when I'm not making YouTube videos. I would get rid of this view orientation because I've got the toolbar, as I mentioned earlier, sitting off to the side. The display style I would keep there because I use this regularly, although you can also set this up as part of your display pane. And they've added to this in recent years, which makes it a little less convenient. The display pane now also competes with the lifecycle and collaboration, but you can turn things on and off, change the colors, and also change the display style, which would be the same thing as this drop-down. The eye allows you to hide and show many little things. Some of the ones that I like to turn on and off would be view planes, but I might use a hotkey for that. Axes, I definitely use a hotkey. Temporary axes, also a hotkey for that. But then you get view sketch relations, which you can turn on and off. Certain things in 3D sketches. And there are many more items in here that you occasionally want to have turned on. Some of these, such as edit appearance, you can get to through the display manager, and you don't necessarily have to have them cluttering up the display in a second area. The view settings can be handy to have right here, so you can turn on the real view graphics and turn off ambient occlusion and perspective or various other view type settings. And everybody likes to have measure handy, although I like to have that on a hotkey as well. There's more about the interface with assemblies that you need to know, but this will get you started towards your own customizable interface setup. The last thing I want to show, and finally, to save all of these settings, you can go to the Tools, Save Restore Settings, and this will bring up SolidWorks Settings Wizard, and you can save your toolbars, shortcuts, menus, and system preferences to a particular named file, and then you can later take those with you to another computer, for example, and restore them, or after you have to reinstall SolidWorks on your current computer to get your custom settings back. You can also reset to default. For example, if somebody else is going to use your computer and you don't want them to be too confused with your setup. So SolidWorks has a lot of interface. This just really scratches the surface of it and shows you how to customize it and save out your settings. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.